This next topic is a huge topic. File, folder, and share permissions versus rights. That means we need to talk about permissions, we need to talk about sharing, we need to talk about files and folders and objects and rights, and so we have a long ways to go. Let's start with permissions. So what are we talking about when we talk about permissions? Let's say that I take this folder here, this videos folder, and I want to allow other people on my network to use it. So I'm going to right click and go down to properties and then down to security. Now let's say that I have a friend named Fred, and Fred is a user on my network. In this case, he's just a user on my system, but let's pretend he's on my network. So I'm going to edit this and add Fred. I'll just click the advanced and then find now. Everybody here who is a picture of a single person, that's a user. All of these that have two people, those are groups. And there are maybe many users in a group. Let's go down and see if we can find Fred. Oh, there he is. There's Fred. I'll just click OK and I'll add Fred. So I'm going to give Fred, let's say, read access. Now you notice when I click this, there we go. When I click this, typically the things below it, depends on which one I click, but the things below it are going to click on and things above it are going to click off. That's because these are more or less a hierarchy. Not completely, but I'm going to take away write privileges and I'm going to give read privileges to Fred so that Fred can certainly read. In other words, he can open up the things that are inside this, the videos folder here. And by the way, the deny things you saw over here, deny overrules allow. If I have something explicitly denied, that overrules allow. System has absolute, system actually is a group account, and the system itself has full control over everything. By the way, if you find that the system keeps changing a file on you and you don't want it to, consider coming in here and just taking away its access. It does work. I've done it. Oh, anyway, that's an aside. Deny overrules allow, and if it neither allow nor deny is checked, like right here on modify, neither allow nor deny is checked, then it's denied by default. So back to Fred. So Fred has read access to this particular folder. Now, as far as permissions go, I can do this to folders, I can do it to files, and I can even do it to devices. Let's go to printers. So here's my printer. I'll just click on printer and go to manage, and then I'll go to printer properties and security. So let's add Fred here. And we'll give Fred, let's give Fred print access, but not manage access on this printer. There we go. All right, so that's security. In other words, those are, sometimes we call them NTFS permissions because it's the NTFS file system that gives us that capability. Sometimes we just call them security permissions. Sometimes we just call them permissions. Now, what about sharing? What's this sharing thing all about? Well, let's go back here again. Let's right-click on videos, down to properties, and to the sharing tab instead of security. Sharing is the ability for different people on my network to be able to access this over the network. So let's click share. Let's take Fred here and give him read-write capability. So now remember I gave him read permissions, but now I'm giving him read-write permissions over the network. So what is his permission? By the way, that is the simple permissions. There's also an advanced permission. If I click on permissions here, let's add Fred under advanced permissions. Fred. Because I can give him, let's say, full control under advanced permissions. All right. So the question is, if Fred logs in across the network, does he have full permission or does he only have read permission? This is an important point. He only has read permission. He only has as much permission as I've given him in security permissions. I must give him at least as high, if not higher, security permissions as I do share permissions. So share permissions are what he can do over the internet, or over the network, I should say. And security permissions are what he can do to that folder or file. By the way, if I go into this thing and look at a particular file, let's just take this file and go down to properties, you notice I have security permissions, but I don't have sharing. You cannot set up sharing on an individual file, only on a folder. So you do not have file level access to sharing. So remember, security permissions must be at least as high, if not higher, than sharing permissions, or the sharing permissions don't do anything. Also, in my printers and scanners, again, if I click this and go to manage and then printer properties, I also can share my printer out over the network. And I can set permissions in that as well. I'm not going to go that far in this, but the last thing here is rights. What are rights? Well, rights are the ability for people to change permissions. And so anytime you see the word rights, don't confuse it with the word permissions. Only when you have full permissions do you have rights, and there are also some things in server and Active Directory called rights management that also deal with your rights to do things in that domain. So rights are not the same as permissions, and permissions are not the same as shares. By the way, with folders, we sometimes just call them shares. So when you hear the word shares, that just means that a folder has been shared out to the network so that other people on the network can access it. But then remember, permissions must be set to that level of permissions as well as the share.